Hello, church. Thank you all so much for listening to this extended pastoral reflection on some of the things happening in our nation right now. I've wanted to talk with you about these matters for some time, but our time in worship is so limited, and these are really delicate and complicated matters requiring careful thought. With all that's happening in our country recently, I've started to hear Christians and other pastors calling out those Christian pastors who aren't speaking out clearly either for or against the Trump administration. Some of them have been downright unkind and mean, but beneath all that bluster lies a fair critique. Every Christian pastor is taught the threefold ministry of Jesus, of which we pastors are an extension: prophet, priest, and king. We tend to revel in our role as priests. That's where we feel most comfortable. We tolerate the administrative work of church leadership. That's the king piece. And we tremble at the role of the prophet in directly confronting social problems and issues, especially in our day and time. Why do we tremble? Is it because we're scared we'll lose our jobs or our churches? No, most of us could go do something else tomorrow and be less stressed, adequately paid, and have the weekends off. Is it because we're afraid to make somebody mad? No, most of us already have pretty tough alligator skin. For me, I tremble at this work because I feel a tremendous responsibility to all of our flock. I love each one of you, and I am so very careful to say things in a way that everyone can hear because I know what happens when I'm not careful. People shut down, they tune out, they leave, or they lose their minds instead of thinking deeply about the thing that has been said. That's why I'm being so careful, so nonpartisan, and so deliberate in this reflection. But there does come a time when we pastors have an obligation to say very hard things about the state of the world around us. I have to say that right now I am deeply frustrated by how people are trying to turn Jesus and the Christian gospel into a tool for partisan politics. The gospel of Jesus is inherently political. It always has been, but it is never partisan, meaning in our case, liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat. Jesus challenges all sides as he insists on making sacred the basic humanity of every single person, from Donald Trump and Franklin Graham right on to Rene Good, Jonathan Ross, and even Nicolas Maduro. The gospel forces us to look at each other with love, respect, and a deep humility, no matter what is happening around us and no matter what we've done to each other. Further, the gospel challenges our wicked desire to divide, conquer, and trash the other, regardless of who the other is for you. If you can't get through the day without offering up a curse to Donald Trump and conservative evangelical Christians, you've got some work to do. And if you're sitting up at night praying for God to slay the wicked, allegedly socialist protesters like Rene Good, you got some work to do too. Now, as a follower of Jesus and as a responsible Christian pastor, I do feel a holy obligation to say very plainly that our nation's current approach to immigrants, the poor, protesters, mental illness, and health care stands opposed to most everything I know to be true about Jesus, the gospel, and the Jesus way. I find it horrifying that a large segment of the evangelical church affirms what is happening. I am an evangelical Christian, and I just don't understand how my sisters and brothers can see Jesus in the way our country is conducting its affairs right now. We all have our thoughts about what national policy should be regarding all sorts of things and we should work those policies out in the halls of power, the public square, and through the ballot box. We ought to be having excellent and respectful argument about these things all the time. This is how we figure out what to do. What I feel we should not be arguing about is how we are treating human beings. Every person of integrity knows that how we do what we do is just as important as what we do. How we do what we do teaches us far more about our society than the decisions we make and the policies we set. It seems to me that in our quest for our side to be right and win, we've lost sight of one of the most basic principles of human decency, which also happen to be at the heart of our Christian faith. We've let the end justify the means, and that is never acceptable for followers of Jesus. The means are the end for the people on the Jesus way. That's what's at the heart of the gospel. Now, I'm no theologian or scholar, but I read my Bible every day. I don't expect our political system to be inherently Jesus-like in the way that it conducts its affairs, but I have to acknowledge that when I read Jesus and then look at the world around me, the current behaviors and methods of our government under President Trump, and some of the behaviors of those working to change those methods, are running against the grain of the way of Jesus. We are not loving God with our whole being. We are loving some image of God that resonates with our politics. We're not loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. We're using our neighbor because we don't love ourselves enough to tell the truth about the real issues we all have, and we've all got them. We're not loving our enemies. We are now killing them in flagrant opposition to the teachings of Jesus. And we certainly aren't praying for those who persecute us because most of us are too busy persecuting those who disagree with us. All of that is convicting enough. But if you read back through the Old Testament and all those faithful prophets whom God sent to call his people back to himself, you find a deeper trouble. The pattern of disobedience that brought judgment and consequences on God's people was nearly always the same. They failed to welcome the stranger in their midst. That's biblical, deeply biblical. They neglected their holy obligation to care for the poor and the sick. It's in there over and over again. They turned from the one true God. Listen now, they turned from the one true God to all sorts of political maneuvering to accomplish whatever their leaders thought was most expedient without regard for the human cost. And they worshiped at the altars of other gods, power, wealth, selfishness. This is what happens over and over again among the people of God, despite the prophet's warnings and a whole host of consequences which they bring on themselves. We see God's heart broken because his people cannot remember that their primary purpose from the beginning was to bless all the families of the earth with the power and presence of God's love, mercy, and grace. They were in the world as a chosen and set apart people to help the world see the holy love, mercy, and grace of God, but they failed at their task because they decided to keep it all for themselves. They decided that God couldn't be trusted and that other people weren't worthy of what God had given them. Are we not living the same story? The stranger, the poor, the sick, they languish while God's people get in the bed with whoever's promising them the most power, wealth, and influence. Some of the most Bible-believing people I know and love are standing on their heads trying to bless a twisted-up version of Christianity which has transformed the love, grace, and mercy of God into judgment, fear, and retaliation. It doesn't take a seminary degree or anything more than about a third-grade education to see that all of that stuff is what the scriptures call anti-Christ. It stands opposed to the Jesus way and to everything Jesus stands for. We who follow Jesus cannot be aligned with any of it, either intentionally or unintentionally by our silence. You'll notice now that I haven't taken a partisan stance in my reflections thus far. It's because I don't think what we're dealing with is actually about partisan politics. I could be wrong, but as a student of history, politics, economics, and people, I fear that decades of greed and legislated self-interest under liberal and conservative administrations alike have produced a self-perpetuating system that is now turned loose on our world. It's like artificial intelligence gone rogue, except the code is greed, the engine is self-interest, and it has already been hardwired into our national life and politics. I don't know whether there are evil people at the controls. I certainly hope not, but it could be. But I do know this. Liberal, conservative, and moderate leaders alike bow before this system. They feed its fires, and they call it inevitable, even as it eats the good people of our nation for breakfast. A few unwitting figureheads have been rewarded along the way, happily weaponizing a deeply unchristian version of Christianity against a supposedly un American secular worldview that just commits the sin of actually believing that you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free still does matter to most of us. Wherever we fall on the spectrum, voices whisper in our itching ears what we want to hear while meaning none of it. Like social media algorithms, they trap us in echo chambers and leave us angrier, dumber, and easier to control. While we fight each other, the system and its cooperating figureheads quietly consolidate power, enrich the wealthy, oppress more and more of us, and strip away what remains of the voice, resources, and dignity of good, ordinary people. The scapegoats in all of this are immigrants, the poor, public education, health care, and imagined socialist enemies. These are the scraps under the table for us to fight about, while the golden calf of greed and self interest is worshipped in plain sight. With money and influence, this system plays our leaders like fiddles and assumes that the rest of us are too stupid to notice. But we're not that stupid, and we don't have to accept this as our future. I think it's time that we who follow Jesus tell the truth about what we're thinking and feeling. Regardless of your political ideology, please write our president and government leaders at all levels, insisting they begin to lead courageously in ways that honor our shared commitment to truth, honesty, and the humanity of all people. Pray for them as you write for them. Insist also that all our leaders be held accountable for their dishonesty, greed, and misuse of power. Insist that they start working together to deal with this very broken system that can be fixed. If they refuse, we must thoughtfully elect those of either party who genuinely care about the sacred worth of all humanity, regardless of their immigration status, their socioeconomic class, or their criminal record. The sacred worth of all humanity is the most fundamental Christian issue of our time. If we can't get this right, we're not going to get anything else right. I think this direct advocacy will have a better outcome than angry, hateful Facebook posts and the destruction of lifelong relationships because of our inability to talk about hard stuff that really isn't the hard stuff we need to be talking about. More importantly, as we stare into this increasingly heartless abyss formed in part by our own complicity, remember that our greatest power is still how we live with and among each other. We do not have to take the bait. We do not have to take up arms against each other. What we must do is to take hands together to protect and care for one another, regardless of our political leanings, especially the ones Jesus calls the least of these. We must choose to be the good people we know how to be, working for a better future in nonviolent and constructive ways. We must remember that any society that abandons truth and integrity in the name of political ends will, in time, abandon its own humanity. As a follower of Jesus, I have my own thoughts and ideas about what is best for our nation. And I, like you, will advocate for those things the best way I know how. Honest conversation, writing letters, healthy debate, study, using my voice and power, and all the things that we all know how to do. I encourage you to do the same, however the Lord leads you. But also remember, as followers of Jesus in this particular place and time, we have a sacred biblical obligation to protect and care for the stranger, the poor, the sick, the vulnerable, and the prisoner. The tumult of our national discourse is making all of this very difficult right now. As followers of Jesus, you and I must stand in the gap at the person to person level, regardless of our partisan ideology. To put some very fine points on what I'm saying, if you have people in your life in danger of deportation or arrest because of their status as an illegal alien or undocumented worker, be sure they know you will care for them. Help them get their affairs in order. Consider caring for their children in the event something happens, and do all in your power to love them through this season. They matter to God, and they must matter to us if we really mean all that we say we mean about Jesus. If you have people in your circle living through the crushing realities of poverty, be sure they have what they need to live. You can do that without enabling. Just have honest conversations and work it out. And if you don't know of anybody like this, be aware that the helping agencies in this community are living through massive shortfalls in funding because of changes in our government's priorities. It's millions of dollars right here in Rutherford County. They need our help in giving, serving, praying, and in advocacy. If you're a healthcare provider, maybe you can do something to help all these folks losing their insurance because our politicians couldn't get their stuff together in time. There are several clinics around town that help folks. Maybe you can volunteer there one day a month or something. This one's complicated, I know, but there are sick people who need help. If you can help, just help. Call your insurance man and tell him to double your liability insurance and just get to work. Please realize, too, that there are so many vulnerable people living in our own community. Half of our people in Rutherford County live in this very delicate place where one missed paycheck can cause utter and complete financial disaster. They are working 2 or 3 jobs, they're trying to get kids raised, and you'd never know that they're praying every night for that last $50 to stretch till noon on Friday when the direct deposit paycheck hits. Just be kind. Be aware. Yes, leave a bigger tip if you can, and don't be a jerk when the clerk is in a bad mood already. I'm going to put my self-righteous and judgmental underwear in the trash can for a while in favor of just being a blessing to everybody I encounter. They are probably dealing with something you don't know about. Be a high point in the day for them. With all Jesus has done for us, this really is the least that we can do. Finally, if you have law enforcement personnel, ICE agents, National Guard members, and other military folks in your circle, please know they are actually living through some very tough stuff too. Most of them are kind and decent people who are trying to figure out how to do what is now expected of them without sacrificing their integrity or their own deep belief in the sacred worth of all humanity. Be kind to them. Offer safe space for difficult conversations. Be honest about your concerns and their concerns, and just treat them as human beings too. And write to our commander-in-chief and other politicians and invite them to consider that maybe the end does not actually justify the means. Church, there are powers and principalities trying to get us to destroy each other. We must resist them in the name of Jesus and in the way of Jesus. I hear the words of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 4. I, therefore, a prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit, that is the bond of peace. I know you'll all remember that word. Peace is shalom, and it is not just the absence of conflict. It has a much deeper meaning: peace with God, peace with each other, and a peace that seeks the well-being of all humanity. That's the peace that lies at the heart of the Jesus way, and it requires so much more work and attention than just the absence of conflict. In seasons of turmoil and uncertainty like this one, faith in Jesus must be more than just identity. It must be a way of life, and it will probably cost you something. As for me and my house, we'll be doubling down on the Jesus way. If you want to join us, let me know. We'll continue the conversation, we'll think, we'll pray, and we'll act in the Jesus way as we follow him through this complicated season. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know He'll show us. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, I'd so love to hear from you so we can be thinking, talking, and praying together about all of this. Remember, folks, I love each and every one of you. I pray for you all every single day. You're in my heart all the time, and I just am grateful that we get to be on the Jesus way together. Thank you.